The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, unfortunately, we just saw the senator from Vermont object to a compromise solution negotiated by Senator Toomey and Senator Lummis that would have mitigated some of the harm from the devastating new regulations on cryptocurrency in this so-called infrastructure bill. Because the senator from Vermont raised that objection, the status quo right now is these new regulations are going into effect, and billions of dollars of value are going to be destroyed. Right now, today, about 106 million people are using cryptocurrencies around the world, according to at least one recent report. The average annual income in the United States for a blockchain developer is $136,000. That represents a steady career, a good income for someone to own a home, to raise a family, to live a good and comfortable life. And Texas is helping lead the way. Texas is taking the lead this past year as a major hub for cryptocurrency businesses and is even being hailed as the cryptocurrency capital. But all of this is under threat. Regulatory uncertainty is the number one barrier to blockchain adoption, according to 48% of respondents in a recent report. And they're right to be worried. The current bill widens the definition of broker. Those who would have to collect information on cryptocurrency consumers and report this information to the IRS. It would force every single participant in the cryptocurrency structure to operate as a financial institution, which would mean they would have to provide consumer information to the IRS, even if they don't have access to that information. This overly broad definition of the word broker will block rapid innovation in cryptocurrencies, and it will endanger the privacy of many Americans in cryptocurrencies. This is wrong. So I applaud my colleagues for trying to find an incremental approach. Unfortunately, because the senator from Vermont objected, that incremental approach hasn't been adopted. So let's exercise a brief, shining moment of common sense. And let's recognize, if we've gathered all 100 senators in this chamber and asked them to stand up and articulate two sentences defining what in the hell a cryptocurrency is, that you would not get greater than 5 who could answer that question. Given that reality, the barest exercise of prudence would say we shouldn't regulate something we don't yet understand. We should actually take the time to try to understand it. We should hold some hearings. We should consider the consequences. We shouldn't destroy people's lives and livelihoods from complete ignorance. My amendment's very simple. Doesn't add anything new to this bill. It just strikes these provisions. It says, look, let's not do this till we know what we're talking about. Let's be cautious. Let's be reasonable. Let's not be the number one economic developer for the Communist Party of China by sending cryptocurrencies overseas to our competitors because we've made it impossible for them to succeed here. Accordingly, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding adoption of substitute amendment number 2137, that the Cruz amendment number 2466 be agreed to.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from Alabama.
Reserving the right to object, I ask that the senator from Texas modify his request to include my amendment number 2535 dealing with defense infrastructure in this country, and that it be agreed to.
Does the senator from Texas agree to so amend?
Reserving the right to modify my request, I would share with the senator from Alabama that I have the deepest respect for the leadership of the senator from Alabama, that I understand the senator from Alabama has a profound commitment to the fighting men and women of our military, as do I, that the senator from Alabama's commitment to invest in our military and military infrastructure is laudable, and I fully support that commitment. And indeed, I would commit to the senator from Alabama that I am more than ready and eager to partner with him to press through in this body, through any avenue that is available, investing sufficient funds in our military, in our sailors, in our soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, and in the weaponry they need to defend this nation. But sadly, we know in this context that our Democratic colleagues are going to object to funding for the military. They have decided that is not within their priorities, even as they are spending trillions of dollars on everything else. Defending this nation is not a priority for the Democratic members of this conference. And so, if your amendment is added to my amendment, the effect will be what we just saw a moment ago, which is a Democratic senator standing up and objecting and claiming the reason for objecting is they don't want to fund the military anymore. I believe it is in the interest of this body to have a clean vote on, do we destroy cryptocurrencies, yes or no, without any other issues, because as much as I would like to join the senator from Alabama in investing more in the military, and I am committed to working with him to doing so, I also don't believe we should be destroying jobs and billions of dollars of value in this country. Accordingly, I do not so modify my request.
Is there objection to the original request
I object.
by the senator from Tennessee?
I
Excuse
object.
me.
Senator, do you have a special relationship, if you would, with Senator Hospital-Pez? Are you going to be reaching out to her about some of the rhetoric, the recent rhetoric about Israel calling the apartheid state, or even Ohio?
Well, I would note, Javier, that you just apparently promoted AOC to senator. And she might very well primary Chuck Schumer. She's certainly setting Schumer's policy and setting Biden's policy. Listen, her rhetoric and Omar's and Tlaib's rhetoric has been shameful in this regard. And particularly at a time like this, attacking and undermining Israel, accusing Israel of committing acts of terrorism, as the squad has done, it is unconscionable. And look, after a while, when every criticism they have is always directed at Israel and not at the terrorist attacking them, you start to wonder if there's a pattern. We've seen anti-Semitic comments from the squad, but the pattern starts to be remarkably consistent. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ought to have the courage to stand up to the crazy left, and instead of giving in to their demand that we cut off essential weapons needed to defend Israel and protect Israel from terrorism, we ought to be replenishing today the munitions needed for Iron Dome to keep not only Israeli citizens safe, but when Iron Dome works and works effectively, it keeps Palestinians safe as well. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kevin, and I share those same sentiments. Our prayers go out to so many law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the last year. And every day, we thank those Capitol Police officers who risk their lives to keep us safe and to keep this Capitol hopefully open again to tourists who can come to the Capitol to see their government in action. But what we're here to talk about today is Speaker Pelosi's constant attempt to cover up facts that she doesn't want out there. You know, for weeks now, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks have been raising some very tough questions that need to be answered about why Speaker Pelosi didn't make sure that Capitol Police had all the tools they needed to be prepared for that day. Now, maybe because they were raising those questions, they got canceled by this new cancel culture that we see moving throughout the country, led by Speaker Pelosi and a lot of our socialist allies here in Congress, where they want to shut out voices that raise tough questions that they don't want to be asked or answered. And yet, they were starting to raise those questions about why the Capitol Police didn't have the tools they needed. What kind of intelligence did Speaker Pelosi get early off, weeks in advance, as Leader McCarthy talked about, that gave telltale signals that could have prevented what happened on January 6th? But Speaker Pelosi said that she doesn't want those questions asked, so she kicked them off the committee. She took an unprecedented step of refusing to allow members to be appointed by the minority leader to a select committee. Had never before happened in the history of Congress. And so as we see these kind of actions taken by Speaker Pelosi to cover up the facts that she doesn't want out there, it has completely debased the legitimacy of this commission. because clearly they're not searching for the truth. They're searching to get a narrative out that Speaker Pelosi has already written. And anybody that's going to ask questions that go against that, she just has them removed so that they can't bring those questions up. That's not an investigative panel. People know that. We've seen other bodies. The Senate's done some investigative work. The Department of Justice has done some investigative work. And it should be about following the facts, not about trying to cover up facts that tell a story differently than the one she maybe has already had written, and she just wants to now get others to back it up. So it's unfortunate that she's done it, because clearly it can't be about people who voted against certifying electors, because she appointed members herself who voted against certifying electors on January 6th, against them on January 6th of 2005, some of her own members who objected on January 6th of 2017. So clearly that's not what it's about. It's probably more about some of the tough questions that were already being raised by Jim Jordan and Jim Banks. And that's a shame, because those questions need to be asked and answered as well. And now they're not, because of the cover-up that Speaker Pelosi's continued to do. We see this with COVID. She won't hold a hearing on the origins of COVID. Too often we've seen this pattern by Speaker Pelosi of trying to cover up a narrative that she doesn't want out there, when we should be trying to get all of the facts. Now to come up next is our conference chair, Elise Stefanik.